All right, so Flex Not Bendy number 20. We have the very last actual stretch for the month, which is the frog pose. I know you've done it. I know you've seen it, but we're going to talk through some really important points about the frog pose you may not have realized. And then I'll give you two variations, meaning I'll give you a regression, and then we're going to work PNF into the standard looking pose. We're also doing the version that is using the wall, which is going to help with the setup tremendously. All right, so the frog pose. Normally, we would use this as a static. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I wish I could have turned the camera on to what Clone was doing. Oh, Lord Jesus. Okay. So normally with this, with the frog pose, we do work it as a long hold, a static pose. But we do have a really great version I've shown before where we just do a moving frog pose that you could work into a more dynamic warm-up, okay? But for the most part, we want to be here for a long time, so have make sure you have a lot of good cush under your elbows and under the knees, okay? And be in front of the wall, so you could do that version. So the frog pose, again, you've likely been in it and felt that stretch through the groin and correctly. That is the area that we want to stretch. So you don't probably think beyond that, okay? But the main setup for the frog pose is that, oh my gosh, I was laying on the cat toy, is that when we have the legs splayed out, you want to have those shin, your calves, to be parallel to each other. Okay, so if you bring the feet together, that would be the regression that we're doing. We want the feet completely parallel to each other. That's one part of the setup. The other thing is that they would remain in contact with the floor, including your entire foot in contact with the floor, because there is a tendency for that foot to come off, and then what you would want to do is actively press that down. The other part is that when we are in a full or a good setup for that frog pose, you want the hip to be in line with that knee, okay? So that we could start out here to set up, but we want to walk back until we're in line, and then create that distance between the knees to bring the hips closer to the floor, okay? The last thing is that we do want to maintain anterior pelvic tilt. So you do want to make sure it's not a dipping of your abs that creates that anterior pelvic tilt by just dropping through and not and losing control of the abs. You do want to start out neutral and just tilt the pelvis into that anterior tilt, okay? So not a tucking in here, go into neutral spine, and then give yourself that anterior tilt so you could free up that space in the hips. All right, so those are the main things to consider. So in the normal pose, if you take it to the wall and actually take the flat of your feet right up against that wall, that is going to help get that set up so that you have a really good line of your calves and your feet, okay, like so, right? Like flat there. And then the same thing on the other side. So that already sets you up. So your upper body could start out in front to where, you know, you're not really feeling any of the stretch yet. And then as long as your legs are parallel, your calves are parallel, your feet are against that wall, then you could walk back until your hips are in line with your knees and then drop, okay? Again, keeping that neutral spine with the anterior tilt, all right? So roll that hips, the roll of the hips back. Now this is where we would hold it here for a while. If you feel like this is too intense, I'll show you the regression and then I'll recommend the sort of the warm up to this pose that you can do. So once you're here and we want to practice the PNF, what you're going to do is take those knees, take both knees, and you're going to act as if, okay, so by the way, if you were looking from the top and looking down, your body, that means you would have sort of that rectangular shape, okay, being made between the wall, your feet, the position of your calves, and that line that's made from your knees to the hips, from knee to knee, okay? All right, so from here, we're gonna take this knees, we're gonna drive it down to the floor and towards each other. So your knees are not going to move, you're not moving them at all, but you're going to contract your adductors in order to create that contraction and tension on your inner thighs. And you would do that with that nice, even increasing hold for about 5 to 10 seconds, then release. Okay, so let's do that now. Again, you're not going to see any movement, okay? Just going to contract, contract, contract. Try to get those, move that ground, okay? It'll be pretty intense. Hold it, hold it, hold it for about 10 seconds before you release, okay? And when you do so, you'll then be able to splay the knees apart a little bit more, okay? So if you want to stay here and, you know, read or put maybe a cushion down under your chest or just come down and rest, okay? As long as you're keeping the mechanics down. All right, so if you have, and I'll just show you the version from the side, okay? So here, okay? So this is the position. You want those hips not out front, not back here, okay? You do feel it here, but you want to be able to go, and this is where I say, and I do this often because it feels good as well, but the point here is you want that line, straight line, so hips to the knee, and think more of creating that distance between the two knees, okay? And then once you do that and you want to add to it, then you could rock the hips back, or as a release, you know, to just get out of that. All right. So the regression would be, if it's really hard to keep it out and your feet parallel or your feet come up like this, just bring the feet together in the back, more into that diamond shape, okay? And do the same thing. And in fact, if you just do that version, regardless of where you are with the normal version, you'll feel it in a different way as well. All right, it'll start traveling into different areas of the hip and inner thighs, which is different for you know, people not only due to flexibility, but because of the way their femur and their hip sockets are positioned. Okay, you could end up feeling a little bit more of a stretch if you change up the leg position like that. Okay, and what did I say? So the PNF, you would do that about 3 rounds. Okay, and a couple tips I'm going to give you if your hips are really, 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 really tight, and this is not something that is going to like be something you could relax into at all, you should still practice it, but just do the butterfly flapping, flutter the butterfly, okay, as one way to warm up before you start. So that was just here. So just sort of get a little blood flow, okay, like this. And the aim here is to be tall and your chest forward, okay? So get a little blood flow like that first. Now, another tip, if you are going into using this drill as a more intensive and intentional part of doing the middle splits, then instead of spending all your time on the stretch, you if you could feel, okay, how the PNF has helped to create that release, then you really would feel the difference if you actually increase the strength of your adductors, right? So one of the best ways you could do that is to use the horse stance. So the horse stance is sort of like a plie squat or sumo squat, in that we're doing a very wide feet position, but it's there's some fairly strict cues to the horse stance, and make sure that you could do the horse stance for a long time and have the strength there if you're really trying to work up to a true middle split. Okay, I think that is it. So, PNF is going to be the key, all right? If you're going for actual increase in the flexibility. And then, of course, just making sure you have enough strength through there. If you're using this as a feel-good stretch, feel free to explore, but just know that you want to be able to get to that rectangular shape looking down from above. Just at least as long as you understand those cues, then you're free to kind of roam and play around and figure out what feels comfortably uncomfortable for you. Okay, that's key. And when I say static holds, we're talking about 1 minute to 2 minutes at a time to hold it, about 3 rounds of that. Okay, give it a go.